Well, as you know by now, Karen Reed is a free woman. She was acquitted by a jury of her peers of all the serious charges. The only charge that they convicted her on is OUI, operating while under the influence of alcohol. And for that crime, she was sentenced to 1 year of probation. Now, as we've spoken about in the past, this was the correct and just verdict. I've been following this case since January of 2024 through the entire pre-trial of the first trial, then the first trial, then all the appeal issues and the motion for new trial. We covered all of it. We covered all the motions and hearings coming up in the second trial. We covered the second trial. And after watching everything, I can tell you definitely that the Commonwealth just simply did not and could not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. So this was the correct verdict. Now, Karen Reed is now facing a civil lawsuit. So remember, there's two different systems. There's the criminal system, there's the civil system. In the criminal system, you have to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt. After all, if you're going to be stripping away somebody's life and liberty, well, then there's a heightened burden. The prosecution has to prove their case beyond any and all reasonable doubt. When it comes to a civil case, since you're just talking about money, which again is not some small thing, but the burden is less, and the burden is preponderance of the evidence, which just simply means more likely than not. So the question is going to be ultimately for the jury, is it more likely than not that Karen Reed backed up her car, her Lexus, into John O'Keefe and killed him? Now, as the civil case relates, we spoke about the different causes of action. There's some causes of action against the bars. C.F. McCarthy's and the Waterfall. They are being sued in Dram Shop. And like I've told you in the past, I think that those claims against the bars have absolutely no legal basis. The entire legal basis centers around the idea that the bars served a visibly intoxicated person. Okay, by all accounts, by the videos, Karen Reed was not visibly intoxicated, which is why the bars should, by very quick order, get out of that case. And then the case will just continue against Karen Reed for wrongful death. So, to discuss this more, this Sunday, I'm going to be having on a civil litigator, someone who has been handling civil litigation for over 50 years, one of the most preeminent civil litigators in the entire country, I would submit to you, definitely in Michigan. He goes by the name of Father Counsel. That's right. Brother Counsel's father is going to be joining us for the first time on the show this Sunday to discuss the civil case against Karen Reed and whether, in his opinion, it has any merit. Is this a case that he would take on? And by the way, my father handles a lot of high-risk cases, so we'll see what he has to say this Sunday, 11:15. Don't miss it. Now, let's go back and talk about a little bit about the criminal case, because there's been a lot of talk about the criminal case. I really, quite honestly, was going to be moving on to another case, talking about Brian Koberger. There's a lot of very interesting things that we have to talk about there. I actually recorded a video on that. It's going to be dropping sometime next week on the latest on the Brian Koberger case. But I was ready to move on because that's what I do. I'm covering a lot of different cases. I don't get so emotionally invested in one case over the next, and which is why I have a certain level of objectivity that maybe some other people do not have. But there's been a lot of outrage and a lot of discussion, and some jurors are coming out now and talking about the case. And really, I wasn't going to do so much my reaction to the jurors talking and my reaction to Karen and Reed's parents talking and all that stuff, because we've all seen the case. We all know it. We all know that the correct verdict here was going to be not guilty. I mean, that was pretty clear. We know the evidence very well in this case. So, just going to be hearing more discussion about the evidence, which we already know. So I wasn't going to do so much of reaction videos on these jurors coming out, or if there's something that's really crazy, then sure, I'll cover it. But I'm assuming it's all going to be the same kind of stuff that we already know and discussed at length already. But then there was a statement, and there was a statement given by a judge. And anytime you have a judge involved and the judge starts talking and it's a retired judge, then you have to look at that a little bit more carefully. And this statement that was given, in full disclosure, I believe that the station took it down. I believe the station took this statement down because it was so egregious. So it's still making its rounds on social media, which is why we're going to have to discuss it. As much as I don't want to go back into the Karen Reed case, although we are going to talk about the civil case, but this is a comment that's made by a judge. And therefore, a lot of people can read and tell a lot of things about this judge. So we have to, of course, discuss it on the channel. So here we go. Let's pull up the clip, and I will give you my thoughts on these comments that are made by the judge.
Karen Reed is acquitted, which means right now no one is being held responsible for the death of John O'Keefe.
And Judge, outside of court, one of our attorneys was asked, are you calling for a reinvestigation into what really happened? You think the Commonwealth will actually reopen any type of investigation?
You know, I don't have any inside information, and I had no communications with the folks involved in this, but certainly not. Karen Reed killed Mr. O'Keefe. They just couldn't prove it to a jury. And in America, that means you're not guilty. It does not, I repeat, it does not mean that you are innocent. She had a lot of nerve saying to that microphone that I want justice for Mr. O'Keefe. She was acquitted, but there's nobody else to investigate. There's no third-party culprit.
All right. So that was the comment. You've probably seen it going around on social media. And quite frankly, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, I guess the first place that really we should begin is the fact that you see it says honorable next to his name. And he knows that it says that. He probably made sure it said that next to his name before he's being interviewed because he wants a certain level of authority when he talks. So when you're talking to the public from a place of authority, from a position of authority and knowledge and experience, you have to just be that much more careful. Not only with the statements that you're making, that they're accurate. That's number one. But number two, even if the actual statements are technically correct, but the implications of those statements, the reasonable inferences that people could make from those statements also have to be accurate. Okay, you're not just some crazy guy on YouTube who's just spewing his hatred for Karen Reed. Okay, we got plenty of those. But you're actually talking from a position of authority. You're putting honorable next to your name. So that just means that you should be a little bit more careful about what you're saying, what the implications are. All right, now let's talk about the actual statement and the statement that he said bears repeating. Now, before I go on to this, I just want you all to remember, I am very careful with my criticisms of judges. In fact, I can say that definitely covering the Karen Reed case, people have been upset at me by the fact that I don't criticize her enough. And I've said I've had some issues. Definitely, I said I have some issues with the way that she ran the courtroom, with her cross-examination, with how she handles objections. A lot of things I had issues with, but I'm always very careful with my candor to the tribunal. So with that disclaimer, I do not appreciate these comments. Okay. And I'm usually very weighted, and I'm very careful with how I'm talking about other judges and definitely other people of the bar, members of the bar. But this is, I think, some statements that have to be corrected. And I want you to understand how egregious and wrong these comments are. Okay. And why the implication is dangerous. Okay. So here we go. What he said bears repeating is the fact that just because a jury came back with a not guilty verdict, that does not mean that she's innocent. Okay. Now, that is technically a true statement. That's true. I don't have a problem with the fact that that statement is technically a true statement. What I have an issue with is the implications of that statement. Okay. Because as a judge, you should understand, and if you presided over criminal trials before, then you've no doubt read this jury instruction hundreds of times. Again, I don't know what type of judge he was, but if he was presiding over criminal cases, then he's probably read this instruction hundreds of times. And that is that every single criminal defendant enjoys a presumption of innocence. Now, I understand there's a difference between presumption of innocence and factually innocent. That's true. But guess what? In America, we do not have to prove our innocence. That's what's so great about this country. We are presumed innocent. Nobody has to prove a negative here. And in fact, that's another jury instruction that if you presided over criminal cases before, again, you've given hundreds of times. And that is that the defendant does not have to prove anything. The defendant does not have to call witnesses or produce exhibits. They don't have to do that. You know why? Because there is a presumption of innocence. Every single person in America enjoys a presumption of innocence and does not have to prove that they are innocent. Now, many people are going to actually believe and still believe that Karen Reed actually proved her innocence in this case. But that aside, even if she didn't, we don't have to go back down there. Even if she didn't, if you are somehow implying that Karen Reed is in a different category than every other single citizen in America, then that is a terrible mistake that needs to be corrected. Okay, when you say Karen Reed killed John O'Keefe, and just because the jury found that she's not guilty doesn't mean that she's innocent, you are suggesting that somehow she should be different than every other person in America. And that is wrong. It needs to be corrected. Do you think that this is helping the climate? Do you think this is going to help calm people down and to trust the jury system, to trust the system that you were a part of and that you probably got paid well to be part of? Are you helping with that process? Are you giving confidence in that process? Or are you throwing and casting some doubt and shade onto this verdict for no reason at all? Karen Reed is no different at this point than any other single person in America. She enjoys the same presumption of innocence at this point, just like everybody else. We don't have to prove our innocence here. Maybe they do in some third world countries. If they pick you up in third world countries, maybe you have to prove your innocence. But our founding fathers knew better, which is why it has no bearing. It has no point to say that somebody is not factually innocent. There's no reason to say that. And all you're going to do is create this suggestion, which is not true. It's incorrect. And it's wrong and it's false. There is no difference between Karen Reed, as we sit here today, and every other single person living in America. And everybody has to understand that. And, Your Honor, you should know that this case does not just have local attention. It's national attention and international attention. Even on my small little channel here, I have a lot of international viewers who are tuning in to this trial because they specifically want to see how the justice system works in America. And let me be very clear. Again, the way that it works here in America is that you are presumed innocent. And if the government, if the state, if the Commonwealth, if a prosecutor wants to strip you of your life and liberty, then they have the burden of proof to prove that you're guilty. And that's why we do not have an option on the verdict form, innocent, because it's not the way it works here. You don't have to prove a negative. You don't have to prove innocence. The government wants to lock you up. The government wants to take away your life and liberty. They have to prove that you're guilty. That's the way it works here. So quite frankly, Your Honor, you have the nerve to say such egregiously wrong comments to a public audience, and you should retract them, and you should issue an apology. You should apologize to Karen Reed. You should apologize to the legal community for casting doubt on this amazing system that we have here. And ladies and gentlemen, this also brings to another point. This is what this judge just exhibited on television and on the stations. What this judge exhibited is Exhibit A into what our founding fathers were nervous about. This is why they created this right that if you are a criminal defendant, you get to be judged by your peers, not by some arrogant, pompous judge who decides that he knows better than everybody else. And let me tell you, I know that his opinion is that Karen Reed killed John O'Keefe. I don't know what he does with the ARCA experts. I'm not sure if he's discrediting them. I'm not sure if he likes blue paint. And I'm not sure what he's doing with Dr. La Posada. And I'm not sure what he's doing with Dr. Russell's testimony or Officer Barrows. I don't know what he's doing with all those issues, and I don't really care. But the point is that he's one opinion, and many, many, many people disagree with him. Many very intelligent people, many people with a lot of experience in trials, judges and lawyers disagree with him, which is why our founding fathers realized the danger of having a judge like this decide the fate of criminal defendants, which is why we have a jury system. That's why the jury system, this is Exhibit A. This is why the jury system is the best system that the world has ever seen. And that's what our founding fathers understood in their infinite wisdom. So this was just Exhibit A. So I hope that an apology is forthcoming. I don't think it's helpful for the environment right now. I don't think it's helpful to create confidence in our jury system by saying comments like that. And that's just not responsible of a judge. You have honor next to your name. You have honorable next to your name. You should do honorable things and make honorable statements and support the system that you have been part of, not cast doubt and shade on it. All right. Well, those are my comments and thoughts about those statements that were given by the judge. And other than that, we will see you back here on Sunday to discuss the civil case of Karen Read with, again, Father Counsel, who is an extremely experienced civil litigator. We will get his opinion and all that. So we'll see you all back here Sunday, 11:15 a.m. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and like, and we will see you next time.